So that connection sort of, when I got to Rhode Island and I was trying to figure out what do I want to do for research, and my advisor was saying, you've got to write up, I had written one article off my dissertation, you've got to do a follow-up, you've got to do this. So I collected data dutifully, never analyzed. I finally threw it away last year after however many years it's been. But I set up this little project, which was to do oral history interviews in Mexico, leveraged by this woman I had met in Washington, who by that time had moved to Mexico, working with a group of Mayans in exile. And they were a group of activists. They weren't interested in my research, but they were interested in women's oral histories. So I was going to gather the oral histories to analyze for research, and they were going to use them to make popular education manuals for doing organizing with refugee populations. And that was the beginning of me starting to have any idea of what action research might be. I kind of backed into it.
What was participatory action research even a kind of a phrase at that point?
Not in my world.
Okay.
Now, if I look at the history of it, in the 80s, it was in Latin America.
Okay. I mean, I know action research was around even in the States since the late 50s.
Right.
But
Kurt Lewin.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It was, if you look at sort of Kurt Lewin's work, and then look at how it got picked up in industry, basically, is who really picked it up. Well, sort of small group, T group kinds of things, too, was informed by some of that systems theory. But it got picked up into the systems theory world and developed that way, whereas in Latin America it got picked up into liberation movements and into activism.
Right.
And that's really where I backed into it a little bit that way, but truly it was. And then what happened was these oral histories that we had collected turned out that the women we had interviewed were politically in very difficult situations, so we couldn't publish the work anyplace. And it was Rhoda Unger, basically, who was writing the book she edited on representations, who said to me, she asked me if I would write a chapter. I said, I don't have any data. I said, I can't use it. She said, oh, write about the process, she says to me. And I thought, oh, there's a novel idea. I thought, what would I write about? And it was there that I decided to write about the whole informed consent process. And to go back to the experiences that I had trying to go through the Institutional Review Board at the university, but more importantly, what happened to me in the process, because I had used all of my feminist knowledge to bring to bear on putting together what I thought was a culturally sensitive, reflective of the power differential and of the power that I had in the relationship, and sensitive to what I thought were issues that they would have about talking to me. And what I realized, in a more Foucaultian sense now, not then, was that I had underestimated the power that they brought to the table. And so when we got into first of all, when we got into me trying to explain to them what informed consent was, it was a nightmare. And I couldn't tell whether it was because I didn't speak Spanish well enough or because they didn't speak Spanish well enough, because Spanish was their second language too. But it had a lot to do with the fact that, signing your name on a piece of paper is not something you do if you've just fled a country and, your husband is still in the country and there are bombs being dropped on people's heads. But also, from their point of view, they had agreed to talk to me because an intermediary had introduced us to each other who was someone that they had confidence in, and they knew that that person had confidence in me. And so it was a trust relationship that had been built on interpersonal connectedness and political solidarity. This piece of paper was rupturing.
It's an intrusion into that trust.
And so I wrote about that. And as it turns out, that's probably one of my most reproduced pieces of work, because nobody writes about that issue. It's such a strange thing.
It's so